So hi Ben, we're back.
Hello.
1 year on since
Can you
the
believe
Beavers were reintroduced. How's it been going?
It's been amazing. It's been absolutely incredible. You know, they've done so much in what is really quite a short space of time. You know, at the end of the day, they've really enjoyed a couple of particular areas of the enclosure. Done a lot of vegetation management, which we expected them to do, and then they've done a lot of other stuff that we didn't expect as well, which has just been incredible to watch in real time and fantastic to bring people in and speak to them about the great work that they've been doing.
And there's more beavers, right, than originally arrived. You've had kits since that. Well, not you personally, but the beavers have had kits.
The beavers, they've been busy. We've had 2 new kits. That was around about September time that they emerged. We've seen 2 on the trail cams so far. There may be a slim chance that there could potentially be another one there somewhere.
Oh, wow.
But definitely 2 confirmed, and that in itself is a fantastic, momentous thing for nature restoration in the county, I think, because it's one thing to bring them in, but those are the first naturalized beavers in the county for probably somewhere around 700 years, we think. Which
that's
is incredible.
crazy.
Yeah.
And they're fully healthy. The kits have had a good winter.
Absolutely. Put on a lot of weight very quickly. Around about September time, we would have thought they'd be about 5 kilos, something like that. They're probably just over that now. Obviously put on a bit of fat for winter time and hunkering down for the cold weather. But very quickly, we've seen with the previous the yearlings that came through in the previous year's kits, how quickly they can grow, and they double in size within about a year or something along those lines. Which is quite incredible. It's they're having a great time in there.
What's the adult weight? What do they get to from 5 kilos?
It can vary. It sort of averages around maximum sort of size for an adult. It's around 30 to 35 kilos, I think, something like that. People.
Wow.
Yeah, they're pretty big, especially Boudica, who's the sort of female parent of our family group. She is really quite large for a beaver, and me and my colleague Pete carried her down as part of the reintroduction day, and with the weight of the cage as well, we were both kind of looking at each other like, oh craggy, this is it's quite a lot, but it varies, like anything, and up to about 1 meter in length, something along those lines, but 35 kilos or something like that is usually for about a large adult.
So Boudica's the mum. Have you named the kits yet? Have the kits got names?
Yes, they've all got names now. We took a bit of time to consider what their names should be, and thought the best option at the end of the day was to put it out to our members in the general public and see what their thoughts were. And it was actually a young family, a couple of kids that came up with the idea of naming them after our native trees that we would find out on the reserve and across Northamptonshire. So they've all got names now: Holly, Willow, things like that. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
So Holly and Willow, the new kits? Or are they the yearlings?
They're sort of in there, dotted around. It's difficult to tell, obviously they all look very similar at the end of the day, but they'll be, sort of around there somewhere.
And you say they look similar, but how often do you see them? Because they're nocturnal animals, they're notoriously shy. So have you seen them many times, kind of in the wild?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a dice roll. They are very elusive. They are more nocturnal than anything else. They're technically crepuscular, which means their activity is sort of between dawn and dusk as their most active times. But generally we don't see them in the morning. It's more as the sun sets, going in towards the night time. And as I said, you can maximize your chances of seeing them being in the best location at the right time, looking in the right areas and all that kind of thing. But even then, it's up to them whether they emerge or not. So it's really dependent on how they're feeling at the time. So we do see them, if you're looking in the right area, 50% success rate, I'd probably say. But at the end of the day, it's completely up to them.
And are we close to the right area now? Is this the lake that they're in, or are we not there yet?
Yeah, we're looking in this direction, so you can see our beaver fence enclosure.
So this
here.
is the beaver fence.
This is the beaver fence, yeah. It's of a particular specification which was agreed by Natural England and the Beaver Trust as part of a license agreement to keep the beavers only within the agreed enclosure that we've agreed on. So this is Delta Pit here. The fence itself, obviously you can see there's an anti-climb feature at the top and an anti-dig feature curtain underneath.
So that fence goes down into the ground a bit?
It does, yeah. It's reasonably deep, but you can't really see the thing that's really preventing them from digging their way out at the moment point in time, because the vegetation's grown up quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is similar mesh wiring such as this that leads 90 centimetres into the enclosure on the ground. That's pegged down, and that means that if the beavers wanted to dig underneath, essentially they'd kind of reach this point, start digging, won't get through the netting, and then go somewhere else basically.
And obviously a year ago when I came and saw the reintroduction, this had just been put in. You hadn't yet been tested by any beaver. So a year on, have they been at it? Have they tried to get through it?
One of the areas that we were quite nervous about, particularly, was on northern edge, which is closest to the river, because they're obviously attracted to running water. Their instinct sort of brings them towards that kind of area, and we were quite nervy about it to begin with. So we had some cameras pointed in that direction, and they did test it a couple of times. We saw them kind of pouring away, stopping to smell the water, and trying to test the fence really, but nothing really more than that. Eventually they kind of got adjusted and used to life here, and they've got everything that they need at the end of the day. They've got so much more willow than they know what to do with.
And willow is one of their main food sources, right?
Yeah. So stripping tree bark and then eating the vegetation that responds to the felling process, that coppice regrowth that they'll have, is absolutely one of the main parts of the diet. Saying that their diet is really varied. There's I think 200 different recorded species of plants that they've been recorded to digest, and but trees at the end of the day are right at the top of that list, and willow, poplar, aspen, things like that, that are water tolerant, and would be a natural part of their landscape and the habitat that they would naturally live in.
Yeah. Okay, let's walk and talk. Keep warm. It's another cold January day, although not as cold as the original February day that we
no, it was bitter,
we
wasn't it?
saw the reintroduction. So in terms of eating and felling trees, I think some people have a concern that beavers will decimate a landscape. All they want to do is fell trees, and that's it. How have you found it seeing a year of their activity? Do they fell more trees than you expected?
It depends on the time of year. I'm not entirely sure whether we had any real expectations on that. I mean, obviously we know it's part of their behaviour, and we knew it was going to happen, but that's what we wanted at the end of the day. So it's part of the natural process. I mean, you mentioned the fact that people view the people chopping down trees and the beaver activity, like you say, is using that language like decimation. It's quite aggressive, and it looks quite aggressive on the face of it, but really what we want as conservationists is to create disturbance which then promotes regeneration. And it's important to remember the fact that that's a natural life cycle. It's part of the natural life cycle of these trees, these particular species of trees. Willow are incredibly difficult to kill. It is that part of their natural cycle to shed limbs, to be felled by large herbivores like beavers, and then respond to that with regrowth, regeneration, and that's what we try to promote, because that's what's fundamental to the ecosystem. So I think, initially, that especially when we were doing the clearance work, and when it was us that was felling the trees to make way for the beavers, there was quite a lot of pushback from certain people. But then, having seen what they've done and the way that they do it in a particular way, I think it's turned on its head completely. I think the positivity has been overwhelming at times, and it's been really reassuring, that we can go through that process with people.
And am I right in saying that there's some natural kind of coppicing that goes on with the beavers in terms of they're managing the willow as a food source? So it's not in their interest to destroy it all. They want to coppice some of it to keep it growing.
Exactly, yeah. And it is, it's beaver farming at the end of the day. They fell the trees. It actually extends the lifetime of that tree. and then will feed on the regeneration that comes as a byproduct of that. So, we've seen it in real time around areas, sort of dotted around the lake edge like this. There's evidence of beaver gnawing just down here, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So these stems just dotted around here, you can kind of see the angled point to the end of them. And those have been gnawed by beavers. This being, so close to the water, it's got everything that it needs to continue regenerating. So I imagine that over the next 6 months or so, this will grow up as a bushy shrub, and then the beavers will come back and start gnawing on it again.
So this snapped twig there or branch there,
there's a little bit there as well, but you can sort of see a couple of the stems coming out of the larger one down at the base.
That
there,
stump down there,
that again is once you get your eye in for it, it becomes more obvious, but that kind of angled point to all of those smaller stems there is what we're looking for, really.
That's fascinating, and that's right up to the viewing platform that people can come to.
No,
so have beavers been active all the way around the area, or do they have particular favourite spots?
Both, really. Their activity is spread out absolutely across the entire enclosure. We can see them. It's within around about 20 metres or so of the lake edge, but lots of activity on the north side. They've built a lodge over there as well. We can potentially see, over in that direction there's a bit of bark stripping.
Yeah, you can see the bark stripping there.
Over in that direction as well. But they do have particular areas. They are creatures of habit, and there is an area particularly on the south side which is right next to another lodge that they've got, which is seen a lot of activity. There's a huge tree that went over there a couple of months ago, which was really impressive to see. And there's lots of canals down there as well.
So they gnawed right through the trunk?
Yeah. It took about a month for the felling process to take place. And then they essentially leave it to the elements. They wait for a big gust of wind to knock the tree over, and that's exactly what happened. We had a bit of a storm. The tree went down, and then they got to work with bark stripping the entire thing and processing it and eating the canopy vegetation. We were able to document all of that. Throughout the whole process, over a period of about 2 months or so, it took them to start felling it and then finish and leave it alone. It was quite incredible.
No way. And bark stripping, they do that to eat? Are they eating the bark?
Yeah. So they're trying to get to this. You always say the more nutrient dense part of the bark. I mean, bark isn't particularly nutrient dense in the first place, compared to an avocado or a steak or something like that. But what they want is the inner layer, the inner sort of cambium layer of that, and that is, in comparison to the rest of the tree, more nutrient dense. So they kind of strip in the same way that the tooth of a chainsaw really would do. It's sort of taking off thin strips of material, and they can do that relatively effortlessly. It is quite incredible to see how quickly they can strip an entire stem, all in a very short space of time.
And do all the family join in on that? Are the yearlings and the kits kind of having a nibble too?
Yeah, we do have a couple of clips where there's multiple beavers gnawing away and bark stripping in one particular area, and then a kit will sort of bound along. They do have this kind of bouncing motion when they're very young, and get stuck in and join in and learn from the parents at the same time, and potentially their sisters too. They are fantastic in the fact that they can work as individuals completely fine, but also work together on particular things. And seeing that process again, between the kits, the yearlings, the adults, and the parents, has been a really, really, interesting and enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. And tell me about the canals. So they're quite an exciting aspect of beaver behaviour. Is that going through the reed beds that we can see over there?
Yeah, so they're actually tucked away a little bit in an area that we call the inlet, just to sort of the southeast corner of that area. But there may be, ones in that particular reed bed that we can see there. We just can't get to.
And why do they build canals? What's the purpose?
It is essentially to make their lives a little easier. It's the same way that we would build road networks, to make it more straightforward to go from A to B kind of thing. The beavers build the canals because they're most comfortable in the water. They want to spend the majority of the time in the water if they can do, and if they want to get to a particular place, it's easier for them to fill it with water and then use that canal to access where they want to go. Obviously, both for their mobility, but also for the material that they might want to extract from that area. So that is actually one of the reasons why we picked up on signs of the canals around that area. We started seeing more felling activity and vegetation stripping and management of previously coppiced willow in and around that reed bed. And as soon as we put a camera there, we could see them taking those stems, sort of things about this sort of size, perfect size for the beaver, getting out into those canals, floating it out into the water, and you see proof of concept. It just makes sense at the end of the day. It's so much easier to float material than it is to look it around and drag it. So.
And to what extent is that doing some of the Wildlife Trust's job for you? So presumably reed beds can get too dense, willows can overtake areas. Are beavers helping to keep on top of that for you guys?
That's absolutely it, yeah. And at the end of the day, we get quite a lot of questions about, how do we manage the enclosure and, what kind of conservation work do we do in here? And the response is quite straightforward in the fact that we've handed it all over to the beavers. The only reason why we do those things in the first place is to emulate the natural processes that things like beavers, oryx, elk are large herbivorous creatures that we've lost, unfortunately. Over time would have facilitated that process within the ecosystem. So reed bed management, there was a project around about 10 years ago or so where we had to clear a number of large willow because the reed bed was suffering. Eventually the willow will succeed and outcompete the reed, and the reed bed will dry up and we won't have that habitat anymore, and we want to retain it, so we had to get rid of the willow. That started to regenerate over a period of time, but now the beavers have come in, started to keep it at bay, and are doing that process for us, which otherwise we would have had to spend time, effort, money on contractors to do it, or potentially gone and done it ourselves, which is so tricky in this kind of area. So it makes total sense at the end of the day.
Are you itching to get them into the other lakes as well then?
Not at present. I think it's definitely something that we're wanting to consider. Obviously the legislation has changed now, so actually amazingly it was only 2 weeks after we did our reintroduction event here that the legislation ended up.
Yeah, I remember, after spending all this money on these fences.
Well, you can't write it, can you? But I mean, I thought it was fantastic at the time. I still think it's fantastic now. It coincided brilliantly with what we were doing, and as well, there was another enclosure release a couple of weeks previous, so it was in the news for a lot longer. We as well, it's just in terms of stepping stones. It makes more sense to do it this way in terms of the fact that if at some point we want to do a wild release across the entire catchment of the Nen, we can bring landowners and people, stakeholders we want to engage to the enclosure and show them, proof of concept and what the beavers are doing.
Yeah.
Before we jump off the deep end and attempt to do a whole wild release. So doing these gradual steps, I think makes sense, and would give a longer longevity and more high success rate, I think, for that kind of project. So it's not something we're looking at immediately. We're just concentrating on the enclosure. Our enclosure beavers at the moment, but it's fantastic news that it is a possibility, and we'll definitely be looking at it at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And is this our first sight of a beaver gnawed log?
This is it, yeah. So this is exactly what they do. You can see the sort of pointed end to it. They're kind of stripping material off, and you can see the bite marks.
You can see the teeth marks going
That's it,
through.
yeah. And they'll get it down to a point, and it'll either fall off or they'll break it off naturally. And something like this, where they've obviously had a go at it both sides. It's essentially processing. It's the same thing that we would do when like when you're felling a tree, breaking it up into manageable chunks and then moving it on to somewhere else. They're doing exactly the same thing. So the rest of these stems will float out down the canals or out into the water, and then they'll go and either strip the bark or do something else with it. Maybe build a lodge with it or something like that.
I did not know that they chop them down into manageable logs.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. And occasionally we'll see things like this and be reminded of that kind of connection again, where they do things in a very logical way, like we would try to do, I suppose.
And how do you think it's ended up here, on kind of next to the path? Would it have come up with some flood water and gone back down?
I
or
think
have they moved it there on purpose?
I think that's human activity. I think.
Oh right, okay.
I think someone's taken one from elsewhere and on a walk or something like that.
Someone wanted a souvenir.
Yeah. They're very far away from the water here. It's unlikely that they'd be, especially carrying something that large here in this direction. So a souvenir, a lost souvenir.
Yeah. You didn't leave it out there on purpose for us to find?
Absolutely not, no.
Nice.
I think we're within the visitor centre and things. I think if you're willing to come in here, then
It's going to test the height of my wellies.
I think it should be alright. Ooh.
Very close. So tell me about this amazing spot. We're standing in the middle of a reed bed. I'm almost over my wellies, but there's such clear sight of beaver activity here. What exactly can we see? What's been happening here?
So essentially what we're looking at here is the beavers recoppicing already previously coppiced stools. So this is an area that I mentioned about that a larger project that we cleared out a lot of mature willow around about 10 years or so ago, and what's happened since then is the willow has started to grow back. As it does, it's very difficult to keep on top of it completely, and if it was left to its own devices for another 5 to 10 years, eventually it would get to a stage where it would start affecting the health of the reed bed around us, and start to degrade that habitat, which would be quite unfortunate to miss out on the potential of the reed bed habitat that we've already got. The beavers have come in. This is exactly the ideal size for them to start getting quite a lot of bang for their buck. Imagining this in full leaf somewhere around spring and summer. There's quite a lot of vegetation that they can be taking away. There's obviously a lot of bark there. It's already of a perfect size for them to manipulate and get out into the water and move out to wherever they need to take it. And then they could potentially use some of this stuff for building structures as well. So some of the lodges that we've seen them build could potentially have material that's been taken from this particular area as well. So there's a lot going on in a small space, I suppose.
There is, and as I say, we're in the middle of a reed bed, but it seems quite cleared. We can see different channels branching off around us, and that's also done by the beavers, right?
Yeah. So I said, the creatures of habit, they'll use the same routes continuously. What we can see for the most part are flooded runs, I think, particularly that one over there that we can see.
Yes.
Those are runs and trails that they've created from walking around, that has then flooded over the past couple of days, and filled with water in that respect. As well, there are canals in and around this area, which have obviously sort of topped over with water, and we're unable to properly see the depth of them and how well excavated they are at this point in time. But you can see, like you mentioned, the areas that they would take, and there's routes that are consistent, and the impact that they've had on the reed bed as well.
So what's the difference between a beaver canal and a flooded run?
So the canals would be excavated.
So they're digging down into the soil.
Yeah, and as well, this. Viewing this area over the spring was just absolutely mind-blowing, because when you see one up close and personal, you sort of appreciate the engineering that's gone into it. It's not just digging a ditch. They pack the sides with material. They
really?
take so there'll be sort of bits of the reed, bits of the woody material, sticks, twigs, mud. They'll pack the sides with to make sure that the banks are strong. It's all a very, very even depth. It's a very even width as well. And, it just looks like it's purpose built for, exactly what they want
Wow.
to do. So
So when you said earlier it's kind of similar to building roads or actual, human canals, it is similar. They're making a permanent structure
absolutely
for their transportation needs.
And they'll go through the process of managing them and repairing them and things like that. And as with a road infrastructure, at some point, we'll get an aspect of weather which will degrade it, and then they'll have to come in and patch it up and do a bit of a repair job kind of thing. So it's an ongoing thing, and it's around about this time of year that they'll be doing things like that. Same with the lodges. And if they were to be building dams anywhere, not within our enclosure, but they would be repairing the dams as well.
And we're here late January, almost 1 year on. I mean that willow tree looks dead to me, but it's not. This is coppice. This will be bouncing back with life in late spring.
In a very short space of time, and that is what we do really in conservation. We create situations like that to promote the regeneration that follows. And I understand how it can be tricky looking at something like this that, like you say, looks for all intents and purposes like it's dead, it's done, it's finished, and there's so much destruction happening. But this is how nature intended at the end of the day. Like in 3, 4, potentially 6 months' time, it's going to be a big bushy shrub, and there's going to be so much more vegetation that the beavers then can come back to and eat that vegetation, and cycle repeats.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And you can see so clearly. We got excited about that I got excited about that first log we saw, but now we're up at a willow tree, and every single branch and log is gnawed and has clear signs of beaver activity.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Right, let's see if we can extract ourselves with dry feet.
Try not to get a breach. So we'll head down there. I mean, you can see a bit of nori on that one. Huh. This is actually...
So is it relatively fresh nori? Because we can see the colour of the tree inside.
The colour, that sort of like vibrant reddish colour is, absolutely, indicative of its freshness, the fact that it's relatively recent. How recent? Not entirely sure. Maybe the past couple of weeks, maybe a month. It sort of depends on the tree. And then, this is kind of like a good example of their behaviour, really, to a certain degree. Sometimes they'll be really interested in felling a particular tree, and we'll just continue gnawing at it until it's done. Yeah. But actually, quite often they're fantastic at starting things and then not really finish them. So we'll see. Relate. Exactly. I think we all can, and we'll see things like this dotted around all over the place where they'll start something, move on to the next place, and essentially finish that. So it just sort of adds to that kind of dynamism, and
I guess there's some forward planning there as well.
Yeah.
If they come back to a site, it's already been started, made it a bit easier for them in future, as opposed to just sticking to one thing and going at it.
Yeah. We've seen that in other areas of the site, especially on the sort of southern lake edge, which they really favour. We saw quite a lot of bark stripping of these huge poplars around about April, May time, and then they just left them. It was probably maybe like 10, 15 trees or something along those lines that they were really interested in for a very short space of time, and then they disappeared and went somewhere else. And but then they came back around about September, and that was the largest tree that they ended up felling up until that point in time. They came back, they worked away, and they've actually taken maybe 3 or 4 or something like that in that area. So you're right, there is forward planning, I suppose, in situations, but this kind of thing, very, very indicative. You can actually see as well on the sort of the smaller stems, those shoots coming out. They don't have any leaf cover at this point in time, but that is all new regrowth from where the beavers have gnawed them in this particular area. Actually, quite early on, from as I remember, we saw these signs probably March, maybe April time, so only a couple of months after they came in. And what you can't make out because of the water, the flooding that we've had over the past couple of days, is actually there is a canal leading off in that direction, and there is a breaching point where you can see that excavation work that they've done leading off out into the reed bed. And if you were to have an aerial view of the reed bed itself, all of those different networks and channels moving in and around would be really complex and interesting. So yeah, it's quite a lot again happening in in a small space.
So is this the site of some of the first trees you saw felled?
Yes, it was around about April time. I think it was somewhere between April and May. We started seeing activity in this area, and what was at the start just one tree sort of became two, and then three and four, and kind of carried on from there. But this was the first evidence of them taking larger stems, larger trees, and you can see the effects of it, and it's quite impressive at the end of the day.
Yeah, these are getting quite substantial in size as well, right?
Yeah.
So do you know roughly how long it would have taken them to go through? Were they starting in February and it took them till April, or?
We sort of, it's difficult to tell with ones like this. I mean, obviously we were kind of learning with the beavers as to where they wanted to spend the time, and where they would be interested. So we kind of saw the after effects of these kind of trees before we started seeing like the earlier sort of signs. So it can vary. I mean, at the end of the day, if a beaver is really very, very interested and keen on getting one particular tree down, something like this might only take them an hour or two.
Really?
Yeah, in certain
Wow.
circumstances. Especially that this one here, to a beaver, not a fantastic amount of material.
Yeah.
Something like this, definitely sort of in the range of maybe 2-3 more hours if it was just continuously working.
Wow.
But what we kind of find is that they'll do a little bit, and then they'll go off and do something else, and that kind of constant movement, constant change is generally their pattern of behaviour.
Yeah.
So they'll start it, they'll come back and finish it off another time.
It's also fascinating to me that this isn't a very secluded spot. Like Rushton Lakes were next to a large retail park, a busy road. They could have gone to a more secluded part of the lake, but they seem fine here near human activity.
Yeah. I mean, we are probably literally about 20 meters, if that, away from quite a busy path. And as you say, so many shops. We're right behind Next at this point in time. It's quite crazy to think how much human interaction is happening just across that fence. But they don't really seem to be too disturbed or perturbed by the human activity that is around them. And I think that definitely has taught us quite a lot, because we were expecting them to, as you say, sort of stick to the more secluded areas. But it bodes well, because I mean, at the end of the day, we want to promote the kind of the free living situation between people and beavers, and it's something that we're going to have to get used to at the end of the day. And the fact that they're already somewhat acclimatized to it bodes really well for the future, I think.
Yeah, and so what have you discovered about that human beaver activity in the year that's passed? So how excited are the public about the beavers here? Are they disappointed that they don't see them? Is everyone arriving expecting to see them splashing around the lake? Or how's the reaction been?
Yeah, we definitely went through a sort of a period, especially within the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months, of limiting people's expectations, I think is probably the best way to put it. There were quite a few people who turned up looking for them just in the middle of the day. They'd heard about it on the news or read about it on social media and things like that, and they're out with the binoculars, very, very keen. Trying to catch a glimpse of one just as they were walking around the lake there. But they're generally very elusive. They're crepuscular by nature, although they're much more common to be nocturnal than anything else. So just as the sun sets, they will emerge at that point in time. But they are incredibly secretive. They're much happier in the water, and they sit quite low in the water as well. So even when they're out in the water, it's quite difficult to see them. In terms of those interactions, though, we've been blown away by the support from the general public. Really, at the end of the day, it's the thing that's, I think, given me the most enthusiasm and taking me back as the most out of the whole process, because I thought the support was so great at the start, but I thought eventually people would become adjusted and it would taper off, and sort of classically pessimistic way, I suppose. But if anything, it's the exact opposite of that. It's it's grown in popularity. We have conversations every day with people out about what the beavers are up to. They're interested in how they're getting on. They're especially interested about the kids. And yeah, the public walks that we've done as well have been so successful. We can't put enough of them on at this point in time. They sell like hotcakes. So yeah, the engagement's been incredible, and yeah, hopefully it continues.
And presumably you sell a lot of cuddly toys on the visitor centre.
We get through quite a few. Yeah, we do. We do an adopt a beaver box, which is very popular, very nice. Not quite as popular as our adopt a Highland cow box, which we also do. I'm constantly trying to plug the beaver side of things though, to try and bump it up. But yeah, you get a little cuddly toy in that one as well.
And do you still have to do a fair bit of myth busting? Are there people that think that beavers eat fish and that beavers, kill all the trees? Or are people actually more clued up than perhaps you expected?
I think, yeah, we've again, it's definitely been a process, and I think it's reassuring to see the range of questions that we've had. Definitely initially, before we even had built the fence, when we first announced it and started doing the clearance work for it and things like that, we got a lot of those kind of questions. It was almost every other day when we were out on reserving that particular area. We'd get a certain amount of criticism to a certain degree about why we were clearing the way, why we were cutting these trees down to make way for the beavers, and then you'd get things like, what about the fish populations? And yeah, if this
And to clarify for anyone watching or listening, beavers do not eat fish.
They don't. No, they're entirely herbivorous, and actually there's a wealth of evidence to suggest that they actually promote fish populations, both in diversity and health and size of the individual fish.
Well, it could even see it on the short walk we've done in the reed bed. They've cleared stream paths and canals, as you call them, that would obviously benefit fish that wouldn't be able to go around
Absolutely,
dense reed beds.
Yeah, and the way where they build their lodges and the deadwoods that they create in these kind of situations, this is perfect spawning pools for fish dotted around the lake. And if it was in a water course with quite a lot of flowing water, even better.
And tell me about the lodges. So lodges are the kind of the houses, for want of a better word, that beavers live in. And I know that for the reintroduction you had to give them a readily made one. Did they move into that, or did they build their own in the end?
They spent more time in it than we were expecting. I think it was a process. It was myself and my colleague Gav who put it together. And
so you're a beaver architect now.
We were trying our best to be. Yeah, I think they looked at it and turned around and thought, oh, we could do a much better job ourselves somewhere else. But it was kind of it's like old school den building, really, to be honest. We were just piling sticks on top of one another and trying to make it look as amenable as possible to them, as inviting as possible. But they spent a bit of time there. We turned out the bedding that they'd been brought down in terms of the cages, and put some nice food out for them as well, so apples and parsnips and carrots and things like that for them to enjoy. So they spent a bit of time there, but very quickly they moved on. And that's it's
and when they did build one, how close was it to your design?
Completely opposite. The thing that we just wouldn't be able to replicate is the burrowing aspect of it. So, the lodge is designed to they burrow into a bankside underneath the water level, and then up towards the bank and cap the top off with materials. So it's kind of facilitating quite a lot of different functions. It's obviously because it's under the water, you're preventing predators from potentially being able to get in, but equally if there are predators, they from beavers' perspective, they still think that things like bears and lynx and wolves and stuff are around. Nowadays we're the biggest threat to them, unfortunately. But if they started sniffing around at the top where it's capped off, they can instantly get into the water and out and swim off at quite a rate. There's bits of it that we're just never going to be able to replicate.
Yeah.
And, there's been examples previously of other reintroductions where they've created those artificial lodges and put quite a lot of time and effort into it, and they'll just turn the nose up and just go do it themselves better than we can.
And did the entrance remain underwater? I mean, we had the driest spring summer on record last year. I don't know how much water levels changed in this lake, but did it remain underwater? Were they affected by drought?
Yeah, so it sort of leads into the adaptability sort of aspect of the beavers, really, that whole process, and watching that whole process happen with the year that we've had in comparison to the year that we had previous as well. Like you say, this year has been, or I should say last year, 2025 now, was the driest year that we've had in a very, very long time. There's all sorts of records being broken all constantly, but it was we had such long periods without any rain, the lake level dropped significantly. And then the year previous to that, in 2024, we had more flooding than we've ever had. It's, you know, the juxtaposition from year on year is really quite stark. But in terms of the Beavers' activity, essentially what happened was the first lodge that they created was actually a little more inland than we were expecting, and they dug canals purposely to bring water to that lodge entrance, which was absolutely amazing to see. Those canals eventually dried up because we didn't have any rain, but they move on to the next place and they build another lodge, and that's you know, the adaptability of the beavers. That's one of the reasons why they are going to be such a fantastic asset and tool for our ecosystems and climate change and flood management in the future. Because they are incredibly adaptable. They just went off, built something else, and, you know, perfect job done. Now we've had this flooding, the lodge that they moved into is submerged at this point in time. So whether or not they're sticking around, whether or not they'll go back to the previous place, they might build another.
So they might purposely build multiple lodges for different times of the year.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon for them to have, to sort of move around and chop and change. And potentially even build one, you know, just out of instinct, for that exact reason, because their conditions will change. You know, they live in these kind of dynamic wetland areas, or potentially in riverine systems and things like that, where flooding can happen, drought can happen. So, you know, if they're not able to affect it, then they can build infrastructure to make sure that they're prepared. Random litter.
I love that one.
It's cool,
That's amazing. And in fact, that looks really fresh. So we found what we think is a fairly fresh gnawing site, right? And I'm holding some wood chips in my hand. So you're thinking last week or so?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, it's probably maybe a couple of weeks ago, maximum. I would think they do retain the coloration in chips for probably longer than you'd expect, but it's definitely fresh. You can see that from the coloration. It's good example of what can go wrong, I think, in some circumstances for the beaver's perspective, because it's just got hung up a little, unfortunately. So no box stripping from.
But here's one they felled earlier.
Yes.
Directly behind it in the water, a bigger tree. You said that's felled kind of roughly before Christmas.
Yeah, that was probably sort of around November time, maybe just at the start of December, and you can kind of just make out. I mean, it's covered by the water, but you know, the fact that most of the canopy limbs are missing. You know, they've removed the majority of those limbs. You can kind of see the point at which the bark stripping ends as well, just sort of right in the middle of the stem. And
so they're felling it to get to the bark is their main reason for felling. So you say this one went wrong because it's not in the water. They want it splashing down in the water and then stripping the bark. Yeah,
so I mean, there's a couple of reasons. So the bark is definitely one of them. You know, if they're unable to climb the tree and they can bark strip around the ground, but in order to get to the rest of the bark, then you've got to bring the tree down. So that's one of the reasons. By doing that, obviously they also, you know, over the spring and summer periods and into the beginning of autumn as well, they will have access to the vegetation that's in the canopy, so they get all the canopy growth as well.
Yeah.
And then also those limbs that I mentioned. So the limbs themselves are of a size which are perfect for the beavers, so they don't have to do a fantastic amount with them other than just take them off the tree. And then, you know, especially if they're felling it directly into the water, then it's perfect. You know, they was just a very, you know, couple of bites or something like that, and they've got what they need. They take it off, build structures with it, maybe a bit more bark stripping. You know, a lot of bang for your buck really in just getting the tree down.
Yeah, and I've got to ask about damming. So people think about beavers and dams, and presumably part of their natural instinct is to fell trees to create dams too. Now we're in a lake site, so they don't necessarily need to create dams, but have you seen any evidence of activity of trying to build dams or wanting to build dams?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the damming situation is quite an interesting one. That's another one of those kind of misnomers of beavers in themselves, and we get a lot of questions about the damming. When's it going to happen? Are they damming in the lake and things like that? Generally, the beavers will only dam when they need to create deeper water for themselves. So if you've got a very sort of thin trickle of water running through a woodland,
the beavers are able to then put their dams in place to hold that water up.
Yeah.
It will then back up to a point where it's nice and deep for them, spread out, create that sort of nice wetland environment, and then they've got deep water where they feel safe and secure, and they can go about their business, and it works out fantastically for them. In situations like this with the lake, there isn't a fantastic amount of running water, only when we get tops over from the river during flooding periods, or when the lake is then draining out towards the river. That's when the water's flowing. That being said, so there isn't a fantastic amount of opportunity for them to dam in the first place. That being said, they have dammed just from instinct at certain times. Only within a couple of weeks of them being reintroduced into the area, the lake at that point in time was still at a level where it was draining out into the river, and the thinnest trickle of water was making its way in that direction. And within probably like a couple of days, maybe a week max, they sniffed it out, hunted it down, and put a stop to it. And it was probably the world's smallest beaver dam. At that point in time, it couldn't have been more than 30 centimeters across. It was tiny. So there's a couple of things going on there. There's the instinct of it. They are naturally drawn to running water and want to stop it. But the reason why they do that is to create deep water, which they already have here.
And let's talk about the benefits of beaver damming. So, as you say, they're attracted to running water. So far, beaver reintroductions have had to happen in enclosed sites such as this. It had to include the metal fencing as part of the licence. Interestingly, just a few weeks after your reintroduction, those rules changed to allow wild release beavers without the need for fencing. So two questions really. One, are you tempted to wild release here? We're next to the River Nen. And two, what are the benefits of allowing beavers to do what they naturally do on rivers? What more could we achieve if we allowed that?
Absolutely. I think, your first question about wild releases and what our aspirations are for that, I think at the moment we're just going to focus on our enclosure release. Obviously, it's fantastic. It was amazing news when it came through, and we couldn't believe it that it coincided so soon after we'd done our reintroduction that wild licenses were going to be issued. I think it was fantastic, the fact that it did coincide in the end, because it kept it in the news and public view for a much longer period of time. There was also an enclosure release very shortly before we had ours as well. So it sort of prolonged that exposure, which was nice. For now, we're definitely going to focus on our enclosure. It's going to be something that we're going to be able to investigate. We're going to look into it. Of course, the demand from Natural England in terms of the information and paperwork that you have to go through, it's definitely not something along the lines of we just remove the fence and let the beavers naturalize. We'll have to go through a lot of conversations with the landowners, engagement, stakeholder engagement. Obviously there's funding as well. We need to be sure and prove to them that we have a very, very strong, rigid plan for the entire catchment. And the number of beavers that would be held in a catchment like the Nen is probably somewhere between 10 and 15 pairs, minimum. So it would be quite a lot of work, and it's something that we're definitely going to sort of keep on the back burner for now, but we'll likely investigate at some point. To answer your other question about damming and what benefits we can get from beavers out in riverine systems and things, it really we could literally talk all day about it, because it hits so many different environmental issues simultaneously. You can talk about natural flood management. A network of beaver dams upstream slows that flow. The flooding that we've experienced literally within the past couple of days, the reason why we get that is because it's such a lot of water all at the same time so quickly. If we have networks of those beaver dams upstream, then there's just more resistance, taking that energy out, spilling it out, and that aspect of leaky dams just pushing the peak down really, and that's going to be so beneficial in terms of natural flood management. As well, we get so much out of the water filtration aspect. The holding the sediment up, the water quality will improve, oxygenation of the water. You get ecosystem benefits, which is obviously something that we're all about, the Wildlife Trust. Habitat creation, and going from a situation where you can have a thin stream of water to a wetland oasis in a very short space of time. There's so many benefits as well, obviously, the public engagement aspect, I think, as well, bringing people together with that aspect of nature, I think, is a really, really undersold benefit of these beaver reintroductions. And that's something that we've experienced here, and hopefully, will do at some point in the future.
So beavers on rivers and streams could help slow the flow of flooding. So you're helping any settlements downstream from keeping them from flooding. But you're also holding on to water for dry times, presumably. You're helping alleviate drought.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we've seen, last year was so dry for the entirety of the country. We had something along the lines of 3 to 4 major heat wave events. Mm-hmm. And there were images taken all over the place, agricultural land, just areas of dry, crispy, barren, areas of land that just needed water, and then there were images available of places where beavers had dammed, retained that water, and it looks like an oasis, in comparison. You see that the juxtaposition between the two areas. There was a place that I went to, actually, Ham Fen in Kent, that it was one of the first reintroduction sites in enclosure in the UK, and they have actually agreed or come to an agreement with the agricultural land around them, where, because of the reservoir reserves that the beavers have created for them through the damming, the farmers will pump water from those beaver reservoirs and put it onto the land when it's been in those dry periods. So those examples hopefully will become more commonplace.
That's fascinating, because I've heard a lot of worries that farmers will be anti-beavers, that they'd see them as a potential negative to their farmland, but here's an example of them being a real potential positive and actually providing water.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's, that's the kind of the give and take kind of aspect of it, I suppose, to a certain degree. We're never going to be in a situation where it's absolutely perfect and absolutely ideal, but there are such huge positives we can get out of these reintroductions and the beaver activity, and I think that's a perfect example of it. Yeah.
Also, I think people have a picture of beaver dams as these huge dams we see in the wilds of Canada, you might see in picture books. But that's the North American beaver. We're talking about the Eurasian beaver here, which is a different subspecies. Would that be correct?
Yeah, they are different species. Yeah, the behaviour is reasonably similar, and incredibly similar to a point. You wouldn't really be able to tell the two apart visually, especially as well. I think one of the reasons why you see images of those large beaver dams in North America is because the landscape's just different. I think I have seen examples of those very, very large scale dams here in England. Although it's very rare that you'd have a piece of land that you'd be able to dam off, without finding some resistance somewhere else. So they are certainly capable of doing it. But yeah, you're right in the fact that is a rarity. But quite often the dams are small scale, they're very leaky, and they'll be constantly patched and repaired, and a lot of maintenance going into them, and they change as well. We'll get a process of the dams blowing out during flooding events, and that can be really useful for naturalizing water courses as well. It's another benefit. Like I said, we can talk about it all day. It just goes on from there. So.
Yeah, and that leaky point is really important, right? These aren't solid concrete dams. These are leaky dams, and leaky dams have been used as part of flood management for many decades. This is now simply leaky dams that can be built by beavers for free and naturally, with lots of other external benefits to the biodiversity around them.
And that's it, and that's that's the key point, I think, at the end of the day. We're putting in natural flood management tools that have a multitude of different environmental benefits, and the argument against it would be, well, we've got this very reliable thing that we can do in terms of the grey measures, but it's very expensive. It's going to be absolutely no benefit to the natural wildlife around you, the ecosystem, or people, or apart from the flood management aspect. And the alternative is this sort of free, easy, much more natural alternative, which benefits a lot more things at the same time. So it's a really, really interesting aspect of the behaviour, which has so many benefits to us, as we've said.
So we're almost 1 year on from that announcement that wild releases will now be allowed if they meet strict criteria. I'm not sure if any have happened. There might be one in Dorset, but are you hearing of any others that have applied for wild release or that might be getting close?
Yeah, so as to my understanding, that the number kind of varies depending on the source, but I think it's around about 30 or so organisations that have put in an expression of interest in Natural England, which is essentially the starting point to make those conversations with Natural England, understand where the reasoning is coming from, the justification, whether or not it's appropriate, and the kind of various different considerations and factors that need to be brought into the overall project before any actual work is done. There are 2 so far, I think, that I've heard, Purbeck, and there was definitely another one, the name escapes me. There is some criticism of the fact that the paperwork is overbearing, which I think there is something in there, and that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen any further ones. But I think what we will likely see is people getting through the stages of getting past the sort of the brunt of the paperwork, if you know what I mean, and getting to especially organisations like ourselves that have to go through the funding stage. That all takes time. So I think this year, potentially next year, we'll start to see them come through.
Yeah. But to achieve all those benefits we just talked about, at some point there's going to have to be a leap of faith of allowing beavers onto a river somewhere that is near human habitation, and then we'll really see if all the theory is correct. And I mean, what a momentous day that will be. I think there'll be a huge number of people across an enormous amount of different walks of life in the UK that will, it was already momentous when they did that first wild release in Purbeck, but to see it on an actual river catchment, like you say, where they will be able to naturalise and distribute, and you'll be able to see and those population dynamics that I've only read about in textbooks. I've never seen that in my actual real life. So it's all stuff to look forward to, and hopefully it will be sometime soon. Yeah, and when we came last year, we were asking similar questions, and they were about ifs, really, if this could happen. Now it's a when. Now it's legally allowed. It's a case of getting through the licensing and agreements, but it will be when, and that will be super exciting. Definitely. It could be this year.
It could be, I mean, as with the announcement for the license change, it could be next week. It could be tomorrow. We just don't know. I mean, these things they're very, very quiet until they happen, and then you get that explosion of enthusiasm. So fingers crossed it's soon. But like you say, I mean, how much of a difference just the terminology that we're using is in such a short space of time? It is just a matter of when now, which is fantastic to think.
Yeah. So a site like this, a tree felled by beaver with clear gnawing marks, could be coming to a river near us.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, Ben, that was amazing. Thank you so much for showing me around. At the end of a first full year, how does it feel to have made it to a year?
It feels amazing. I mean, it's I can't believe it's been that amount of time, really. To be honest, they've been done so much in such a short space, and every month there's been something new to find and discover. So if it continues like that, then I'll be very happy guy.
And the obvious question is, what's next for next year? So what have you got planned for 2026, and what do you hope the beavers will have achieved by this time in a year's time?
I think just more of the same. I think if we saw expansions of the canals, more felling in different areas, more concentration on the areas that have already favoured so far. I think more of the same would be absolutely fantastic. Obviously, we're going to be collecting more data and doing more monitoring as well. So we're going to be able to sort of piece the data together to create that image and story that we're trying to tell and demonstrate to people how fantastic beavers are for all sorts of different species. So hopefully we'll see more invertebrate abundance and diversity, and things will cascade from there. So more of the same would be nice.
And I've spoken about the exciting possibility of wild releases, which we might start to see coming. But there are a lot of benefits to having an enclosed site like this for people to come and visit and see proof of concept and see what beavers actually do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what's one of the reasons and justifications for doing the reintroduction in the first place is the fact that if those wild releases were to happen, which we now know is just a matter of time of when they're going to happen, we do just have this area which is proof of concept, as you say. You know, we can visually see, landowners can come and see, farmers can see the effects of what the beavers will do, what they can expect, and how they can manage it as well, and how straightforward it is to manage it. You know, if you don't want them to fell a particular tree, then you can protect it very, very easily and cheaply too. And there will be, you know, schemes put in through the government about payments and, you know, money that would be available for keeping the beavers in a particular area as well. So, you know, there's an opportunity to talk through those kind of things as well. But
and are there any other exciting projects going on in the wider trust that you'd like to tell us about?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're constantly, we are 3 counties, it's Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire, and we are just one reserve in over 100 that we have over across those 3 counties. So there's always something happening, constant projects. One of the most interesting things I think at the moment so far is our peatland progress work in the fens. I think, you know, the scale of the area that we're working on in that particular area is enormous. It's kind of, you know, you go out there and you can't really comprehend how large the area is, and, you know, in comparison to the rest of the fens, it's actually quite small. So, you know, the work that those guys are doing there is incredible. You know, locking carbon stores up in the soil, retaining that peat, as well as, you know, building infrastructure and putting in new habitat creation works to promote the wildlife there. I think it's the scale and scope of what is achievable in that area is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, we're working at Strawberry Hill in Bedfordshire is a fantastic opportunity as well for, you know, that kind of rewilding aspects that we're going for. And there's lots of engagement activity as well across the 3 counties. So yeah, we're constantly busy.
And if people want to follow the work you do and hopefully support the work you do, where should they go?
So, I mean, yeah, best thing to do is check out our website, wildlifebcn.org. There's all sorts of different information for all the different projects that we're working on. But the absolute best way that people can support us is becoming a member. We are absolutely indebted to our memberships. You know, a very small donation every month makes a massive difference, and all adds up at the end of the day. And the best thing about those, the money that we get through the donations, is that it can go to, it's not restricted, so it can go to where it needs to be. And that's the thing that we're, you know, becoming more aware of, especially with the effects of climate change and the fact that the usual patterns of behaviour of our nature reserves are changing, and we need to react instantly to things like flooding that we talked about today. And if money is tied up in other areas, then we can't react that way. So memberships absolutely would be the best way to support us. But also, you know, if you're feeling very generous, then we do also have the Wilder Future Fund, which is an opportunity to focus that fundraising appeal and make a big difference. And we're aiming to raise £500,000 at this point in time. We're about halfway to that at the moment. So yeah, any and all support, however large or small, is always welcome.
And they can give via your website is the best way to give?
Via our website, yes, yeah.
And you're a small charity and you achieve so much with that money. So I guess people know that if they donate to your wildlife trust, they're going to get a lot of bang for the buck for conservation.
That's it, yeah, absolutely. We try and, you know, it's something that we take a lot of care and time into and knowledge. You know, the knowledge base that we have across the trust is phenomenal. You know, I've been in this role a relatively short period of time. There's people that I've been learning from who have been here for 20, 30 years, and, you know, not just in their particular role, but all sorts of different sectors and all sorts of different backgrounds. So that, you know, the knowledge base that we have is really strong. We have an enormous amount of help from our volunteers as well. You know, another way to support us would be to volunteer with your local wildlife trust and get stuck in and hands-on from that too. But yeah, with the resources that we have and the knowledge that we have, really, you know, the sky's the limit to what we can do. We just need to get the funds to make it all possible. So yeah, that's the best way that you can help.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you do great work, and I look forward to seeing it all unfold through the next year or so.
Thank you very much.